health insurance. That 20% of the funds shall be used to promote essential drugs, vaccines, and consumables. So if we are saying that the basic blue inhaler is now more than 8,000, a poor person shouldn't worry if we have this fund and then it's properly managed. That 15% should be used for provision of maintenance of facilities, equipment, and transport for eligible primary healthcare facilities. You know, beautiful provisions, but the problem becomes, what do we do with these provisions? How come we have very, very wonderful provisions, and then we don't look at them when we make choices as leaders? How come even the citizens do not know that we have these provisions? Because that is where it starts. We don't know. Because we don't know, we don't have expectations. One of the primary problems we have in Nigeria is that we expect too little from our leaders. You didn't hear me. We expect too little. Because if you read what the government donated to you under the healthcare sector, you won't dance and roll out the drums for a governor who comes to commission a miserable clinic without equipment and without doctors. So the governor built a house, no doctors, no beds, no equipment. And then he comes to cut the tape to declare a hospital open. Meanwhile, it's not a hospital yet. And then you dance and gives him a cow. Meanwhile, he doesn't need a cow. Then if I ask why, they will tell me that Neto Dike and Komeleme or more. I said, but the Dike didn't do anything. It's not his money. And it's a constitutional provision. And he hasn't even finished doing what he set out to do. So when you have little expectations because you don't know, then the people who are supposed to provide for you will not even realize that they have a reason to provide. And when they provide very little, you praise them to high heavens. And when you praise them to high heavens, they have this feeling that they are doing very well. And when they feel they are doing very well, they won't do much more. So the big question becomes, why are we not funding health? Basically because we don't have expectations, not because we don't have money. We were told that fuel subsidy was removed, just so that we would save the money. We all agreed. Some of us didn't agree with the method, but we didn't have a choice. We said, okay, let's see how it goes. But tell us what you want to do with this money. In the first few weeks, we were told that we saved 400 billion, and we don't know what we are doing with the money. Now, we had a few days later that some money has been approved to cushion the effect of the problem. And who got the money? The legislators got 70 billion. It's in public domain. You didn't hear it. They said 70 billion to help new legislators settle down. Not even all of them, just the new ones. 70 billion. Now, if you deploy 70 billion to the healthcare sector, if you use 70 billion to establish a revolving drug fund, nobody will go to any hospital in Nigeria, in the whole Nigeria, without getting basic drugs. But because they don't remember you, and they don't remember you because you don't place demands on them, they can use 70 billion to settle a few political adventurers in Abuja. And they forget the rest of you. And the people that are giving 70 billion, listen to me carefully, they have free transportation. They are buying cars for them with 40 billion. They have allowance for accommodation. They are the highest paid legislators in the world. They don't buy fuel. They buy fuel with their money. So you ask yourself, what settlement are we talking about? So where is our money going? The reason they are not taking care of the healthcare sector is not because we don't have money. It's because we have leaders who either do not care or do not understand, or both. Because one of the things I came here to do is to remind us of our responsibility to actually hold these people accountable. What are we really spending on? We are spending on the things that don't matter. Now people are expected to buy basic inhalers. I thank God that I don't have the cost to do so, because I was asking myself, assuming I still have those guys I buy the inhalers for. It means that because when I was managing my guys who couldn't breathe, I had to buy inhalers for different places. That was the standard practice for my family. So you had an inhaler in the school bag so the person wouldn't forget. You don't bring it out. You had an inhaler at home. We even had inhaler in the car. And on several occasions, it has saved the situation. Boy, where is your inhaler? I forgot it. You bring out the one from the car. So imagine I have to buy inhalers like that now. If I want to provide 3 for one person, that is 24,000 plus. But because it was about $900 then, it wasn't a major issue. I could actually provide the inhalers. And because of that, they were able to enjoy their lives, despite the fact that they were struggling with asthma. So I think it's important that we begin to ask ourselves. I wish I can get that slide on, because I think we need to begin to say, okay, yeah, it's there now. So when you look at the kind of country we live in, you begin to ask yourself, where are we going? I have a picture right there in your presence. And that tells you how a typical Nigerian hospital looks. This one is nice, very chaotic. Because I don't like euphemisms, I like mentioning names and being specific. There was a day I took my friend to the teaching hospital, a tertiary medical institution at Newi. And I saw a patient lying down on the floor. An infusion was being administered, what we call drip. And then the family member was holding the drip. So the family member was converted to a pole. And he was lying down on the floor. And I started asking myself, so if this infusion will take 5 hours to finish, this young man will be condemned to standing like a metal pole for 5 hours. And nobody pays him for that. Why do we have to endure that? Basically because we endure leaders who would not fix our healthcare systems because they don't need it. When they have headache, in fact, when the head is not aching, they go abroad to check whether it wants to start aching. I'm not joking, because it's not their money. The cost of the ticket notwithstanding, you don't tell them that you need 2 million to buy tickets. It's not their business because they don't pay. So these are the kind of hospitals we have, where patients lie on the floor, relations hold the drip for them, and then in the night, sometimes you have to take turns. I don't know if you know about that. You have to take turns this person will use the bed. The other person will say, okay, your case is not very severe, so calm down. The other person will use the bed. You know, if anything you condone, you cannot change. So part of my job is to make you get angry and stop condoning the kind of situation that we have allowed deliberately. Because we'll talk about the fact that they were not here, but you are here. That's the truth. They are not here because, you know, when we leave this place, we forget what we heard, and tomorrow we still go clapping for them, praising them on social media, and they don't realize how you feel. That is, if you feel the way I feel at all. So this is the kind of hospital we have in Nigeria. Not because the doctors don't want to have good hospitals, but because the system itself does not want anybody who is not part of the political class to enjoy anything. If you want to be a doctor that will enjoy life, become the medical personal doctor to a governor or to a president or to a minister. If you are not connected to the political class, you are just existing. And that's one thing we must actually begin to talk about. And when you leave Nigeria and you go to other countries, you begin to cry for Nigeria. When we talk about universal health coverage, you are talking about a concept where an average person can actually get health services per time. Quality health services. Not maybe when you get it, then your economy will die. No. You are supposed to be able to get all the services you need when you need it, without breaking the bank, without suffering financial pain. And when we say all the services under universal health coverage, we are talking about promotion, prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. But we don't get promotion anymore. We don't hear government talking about promoting healthy living. We don't talk about prevention anymore, except we are talking about maybe COVID or HIV. They wait until something becomes a pandemic before anybody talks about it. But when we were young, when I was young personally, they were talking about diarrhea. They were talking about public health had meaning then. They taught us how to wash our hands in primary school. There was a system that wanted us to live healthy. They taught even illiterate mothers how to feed their children balanced diet. If you don't have money for protein, use crayfish. Feed them vegetable protein. Am I communicating? Do we do that now? No, we are not interested. We wait for people to fall sick, then we take them to hospital. That's when the hospital is there. And when you talk about universal health coverage, the concept of people having access to health, primarily because they are able to pool their resources and create a purse they can treat themselves from. You'll be surprised how other African countries are doing. You know, in Botswana, they have 84% of the population having access to a hospital within 5 kilometers of every Botswanan. You didn't hear what I said. Now, if you live in Botswana, there is a proper medical facility within 5 kilometers of anywhere you are living in Botswana. It's because they had a vision to do that. In Nigeria, we have a vision to place a church within 5 minutes of every person. In Botswana, they have a vision to have both the church and the hospital. In Botswana, 17% of the entire country is covered by universal health coverage. But 42% of employed Botswanans, 42% of employed persons are covered. In Nigeria, 3%. So you begin to ask yourself, how can they be so far ahead of us? It's a difficult question to answer when we claim to be the giant. So when you look at Botswana, you see a country that started at independence with less than 2,000 graduates. Today, they are far so ahead of Nigeria in indices that is a shame. If you go to Rwanda, they use drones. They use drones to distribute emergency medicine to rural areas in present-day Rwanda. So if they need an inhaler, maybe urgently in a remote village, they will use a drone to send it there, say in 30 minutes. A drone will deliver 1 inhaler or 2 to somebody in a rural area. That shows you the value they place on the life of this poor person in the village. So they are willing to deploy a drone to go and deliver the medicine. In Nigeria, even the rich doesn't have that privilege. Unless you are in government, so you can fly, in fact, you can have your own personal hospital inside your house. But outside that, we don't have such privileges. So when you look at healthcare in Africa, our statistics is pathetic. Very pathetic. One of the worst, actually, in the world. But the fact is that if we are the most populous country in Africa, the most populous black nation in the world, and we are the giant, and we have what we call the biggest economy in Africa, how come the largest hospital in Africa is in South Africa, not in Nigeria? And I want to tickle your imagination a little. The biggest hospital in Africa is in a place called South Africa. And surprisingly, the hospital has 6,760 employees. They have 3,400 beds in one hospital. They see not less than 2,000 patients a day. The hospital provides medical school services to 3 universities. Sits on 170 hectares of land. And at some point was the biggest hospital in Southern Hemisphere, in South Africa. What is their population? But the pain for me is not that the biggest hospital is there. My pain is that it's owned by a province, Gauteng province. For some of you who know South Africa, where Gauteng is actually the smallest province in terms of size, but then it's a rich province because part of Johannesburg is in Gauteng. But it's like a state, a province owns that hospital, not the federal government in South Africa. A state owns and finances and operates the biggest hospital in Africa. Bigger than any institution we have in Nigeria. Giving world-class services to citizens of South Africa. So the question becomes, how do we explain that with all the money we spent on COVID, putting up tents as if we are conducting wedding reception, and putting emergency medical equipment in those tents, that we couldn't build one serious structure? As we speak, there's no evidence that COVID came to Nigeria. All of the facilities have disappeared. I even suspect that some of them disappeared into people's hospitals or pockets or homes or whatever. Because you can't explain the fact that all of those thousands of beds and equipment and all of that just disappeared into thin air. But that begins to make you think about the issues that we have to deal with. As I begin to wind this down, let me focus on some of the things we have to talk about. What are the implications of poor funding? Emergencies are not attended to in medical facilities in Nigeria. I mean, somebody mentioned that already. That if you have an emergency, okay, we discussed it on radio. If you have an emergency in Nigeria, just pray. Because you may get there and the people are playing Ludo or what? They are not motivated. I've seen that myself. I don't want to continue telling the stories. There are no facilities in rural areas. When I was working with Savi, a funded project, I had the misfortune of mapping health facilities in Enugu State. That was many years ago. And we went to a place called Mbuagudene and Mbuapoti. When I got to the health facility, first of all, nobody was there. I spent more than 2 hours looking for anybody at all. Nobody was there. And the door was open. And there were benches there. We went to the place where they were supposed to be taking deliveries of babies. And I realized that a dog, not just a pet, a wild dog couldn't even be delivered in that space. And I started asking myself, we called the villagers, and they said, no, so sometimes they didn't come to work for 2 weeks. In other words, somebody would come, open the door, and walk away, and go elsewhere. No proper facilities at all in rural areas. No ambulance services in Nigeria. If you leave this place, and you go towards the place we call fire service in Enugu, you see a lot of fine ambulances that were acquired by a government of this state and packed to rot. And I ask myself, why buy them if you don't want to use them? We don't have ambulance services that are effective anywhere, no emergency number. You can't pick up your phone in this era of telecom and dial 999 or 199 or whatever. But we have the vehicles sometimes. So why did we buy them if we're not going to use them? And then, of course, we don't have drugs. We don't have medical equipment. And sometimes when money is approved to get the equipment, we get used equipment in place of new equipment. And they don't just last. We know the scandal that happened when someone was given resources to furnish the healthcare institutions, tertiary healthcare institutions with medical equipment. So we are not just honest. And then, of course, we don't have infrastructure. And we have to deal with the detention of patients in hospitals. One of the things we are also going to look at is what is the impact of poor funding on patients. Patients resort to self-treatment. They pray. They patronize quacks. And then they go to dubious alternative health practitioners, very dubious health practitioners. I don't want to mention them. Some of you hear them, so you know who they are. Then we don't have funds for basic family needs, partly because all of this money goes to healthcare out-of-pocket expenditure. And then, of course, the other implications of poor funding includes the fact that healthcare workers are leaving Nigeria in droves because they don't have insurance in their workplaces. They don't have protection. They don't, I mean, sometimes they also get infected trying to save patients. And of course, healthcare workers do not have basic facilities, just ordinary things to work with. I have the misfortune of living among doctors, and very often they buy their own equipment and consumables. Doctors can attest to that. So you use your money to buy your own gloves, your own consumables, so that you'll be safe. And it shouldn't be like that. So the question becomes, what can we do to change the narrative? We have to learn to hold government accountable. And when we want to hold government accountable, one of the things we must do is to follow the money. When you hear money has been approved, follow the money. But we should also create corporate initiatives like HMOs. And one of those that believes sincerely that we shouldn't depend strictly on government. Please listen to me carefully. There are so many things we are not dependent on them to do for us. And most of the countries we look up to in this world are driven by the private sector. When the private sector becomes strong, when individuals and businesses become strong, then we can tell the politicians what we want them to do. When we are all weak and then we look up to them for financial patronage, they will tell all of us what to do. You didn't hear me. I keep telling us, one example I use, which is not really connected to this, but I still use it, is that the railroad system in America was built by businessmen, not by government. And I must also tell you that the biggest ophthalmology institution in India is owned by a private system. The biggest ophthalmology hospital in America, where they conduct thousands of surgeries every day, owned by private. So you cannot dictate what happens in the system when companies are richer or as rich as the government. But in a system where all of us are going cap in hand, begging for contract and begging for handout and begging for appointment and begging for money, what you get is that they dictate to us what to know, what to believe, what to do, how to live, and everything. And it gets worse. So we need to do something very creative. And when I finish this, I'll round up. Number one is that we must hold them accountable. We must follow the money. We must create corporate initiatives. And we must create community-driven initiatives. I have one peculiar idea we must all look into. I'm sad that most of the church folks have left. But the truth is that we have mega churches in Nigeria. We have the Catholic Church, we have the Anglican Church, we have Winners, we have the Redeemed. Have we ever thought about the fact that they have institutions that do mortgage? They build houses, they sell land and all of that. Do you know that if 2 or 3 of these institutions come together to fund a health management organization, that they will insure hundreds of thousands of Nigerians if it's properly managed? Because they have the trust of the people. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So we have to actually go beyond just praying for people. We shouldn't just have hospitals. We should begin to create innovative solutions. And today is a business or maybe charity to beg for money on radio to rescue Igbos who are trapped in hospital. One of them actually said that Igbos love themselves. So to that extent, you should bring money so we can go and bring out your brothers and sisters in hospitals. And that tells me that if we are willing to donate money to rescue people who are trapped in hospital, why can't we also organize such crude ideas, modernize them, and have a real revolving fund that will help people, which we can all contribute to, and it helps us. These are real ideas that we can explore. But I think I need a slide now, please. I'm rounding up. I'm just 3 slides away, and I'm out of your faces. I want them to see this. This is important. So put back the slide, please. We need to see this. Because when we get creative and begin to solve our problems, what will happen is that after some time, government will begin to look up to us to give them solutions. Can I get the slide back, please? Yes. They will begin to look to us to give them solutions. But as long as we do not do that, we will be servants, we will be begging, and will not be able to get that which we ought to get. I want you to look at your screen. On that screen, you see a young man. Fine young man, actually. He was born in the United States of America. And at the age of 6 weeks, he had a deadly asthmatic attack. He was supposed to die. The mother ran to the streets, clutching him in her hands. Because the mother traveled from Nigeria. The mother didn't remember because there's no 999 or 19. You know, in America, I'm supposed to call for emergency. She didn't remember because you don't call for emergency. When there's a problem in Nigeria, what you do is that you carry the person and do what? And run. So she thought she was in Nigeria. So she ran to the streets. And a good Nigerian, not a good American, it's a real story. A good Nigerian saw her standing by the street because she was putting on Nigerian apparel, helped her rush this baby to hospital. This fine boy you're looking at was 6 weeks then. And the doctors told the mother that if she had come there like 5 or 6 hours later, the boy would be dead in her hands. Because he had acute asthma. He was looking limp already. But the story is not that he survived. The story is that after he survived, the hospital administrator had a meeting with the caregiver, the doctor, and then they came to the woman and said, you look like you are from Africa. She said yes. So are you going back to Africa? She said yes. And then they asked her a simple question. Do you have the capacity to handle such emergencies in Africa? The person said no. And they looked at one another. And they looked at the poor boy and walked away. And they came back just like 7-8 minutes later with a box. Now that box contained the machine that was instrumental in managing emergency cases of asthma. It's called a nebulizer. Then it wasn't very common. Now it's a small machine. And they gave a nebulizer to that woman. And they said, can we teach you how to use it? They said, yes. She said, yes. So they taught her how to use a nebulizer. Now, listen to why I'm telling this story. We're talking about health funding. We're talking about rights. Health funding means that the government of the United States of America valued the life of this boy that was going to disappear to an African country so much that they had a system that instantly provided a solution that would keep that boy alive for good, without much consultations or much prayers. And a Nigerian would have said, since you don't want to live in America, if you go there, you can die. But they gave the solution because they value life, because they understand the right to life. And that is one of the things I want us to go home with today. How much value do we place on life? Look at the young man. He just graduated from the university not too long ago. So he would have been taken out by asthma at the age of 6 weeks, if not for a nation that values lives. Then let's go to another story. Some of you will not like the picture you see, but I'll put it on the screen all the same, and after that I'll get out your faces. Now look at the picture on your screen. Now, unfortunately, that is a young man born in Nigeria. The first young man I choose to call Kenechukwu. The second young man I choose to call Ozemena. He wasn't so lucky because he was born in Nigeria. He was abandoned in a nation where nobody taught him that if you are an albino, that you have to wear long sleeve shirts, that you don't walk around in the sun. Just simple lesson, wear long sleeve shirts. Don't walk around in the sun. Don't walk around and play like every other kid, because nobody invested in preventive medicine. Nobody invested in just talking to him. He came out with a sore, a small sore on his arm. And because he didn't have money, you can be connecting the dots as I speak. That is healthcare funding. He couldn't go to hospital. He will apply this balm, apply penicillin, apply Vaseline. That sore kept growing bigger. Because the nation didn't have value for his life and nobody prepared him for this. By the time he knew what was happening and he was forced to go to the teaching hospital, UNTH Itukozala, he was looking like this. By the time he reached out to the leaders of the Albino Foundation, who called me on the phone to visit because they said no treatment because there's no money. As we were planning to raise money to save this young man, he died. And this happened less than 2 months ago. The Albino Foundation is represented here. They are here as we speak. The people who went to the UNTH, they are here. We didn't save him, not because we didn't want to, but because the system was determined to let him die. Because he couldn't have come down with this. If we had this kind of conference earlier and acted on it, he didn't need drugs. All he needed was advice. Don't play in the sun. Don't stand around in the sun. Wear long sleeve shirts. Word of mouth advice. How much does it cost to tell somebody, don't wear short sleeve shirts and walk around in the sun? How much does it cost, really? And that is why we are holding this meeting today. I called the first boy who was born in the United States, Kenechukwu. I called the second boy born in Nigeria, Ozemena. As I end today, I want to remind you that the reason we gather here is so that Kozo hands together and stop every single
to make his presentation.